The rain started at exactly 3 in the morning. Not the gentle kind that lulls you to sleep, but the kind that sounds like someone tapping messages on your windowpane. Elias sat in the dark, his breath fogging the glass as he pressed his palm flat against it. The cold seeped into his bones, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Behind him, on the desk, a photograph lay face down. He had turned it over hours ago, after the first knock. Not at the door, but inside his head. A voice that whispered his name in a language he had never learned, yet understood perfectly. It said, "Remember." And he did. He remembered everything. The house on the hill, the girl with the silver hair, the door that should never have been opened. The rain grew heavier. The tapping became a rhythm, a heartbeat. Elias closed his eyes and let the memory swallow him whole. The house had always been there, even when no one saw it. Perched on the hill like a vulture waiting for something to die. Elias had been 12 the summer his family moved to the valley below. He remembered the first time he saw it, a crooked silhouette against the bruised sky, its windows like empty eye sockets staring down at him. The locals called it Blackwood Manor. They said the last family that lived there vanished in 1923. No bodies, no blood, just a half-eaten dinner on the table and a gramophone still playing a waltz. Elias had laughed at the stories then. He was a boy who believed in science and reason. But that was before the dreams started. Before he woke up with dirt under his fingernails and a name on his lips he had never heard before. Evelyn. He said it now, standing in the rain, staring up at the only lit window in the entire mansion. The light flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out. He found the locket 3 days after the funeral. His grandmother's funeral, though he barely knew her. She had been a cold woman, distant, with eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. The attic was her domain, a labyrinth of dust and forgotten things. Elias had gone up there out of curiosity, or perhaps because something pulled him. The chest was hidden under a moth-eaten quilt, its wood dark and warped with age. Inside, there were letters tied with a black ribbon, a child's shoe, and the locket. It was silver, tarnished, and when he opened it, he expected to see a photograph. Instead, there was a lock of hair, white as bone, and a single word engraved on the inside of the lid. Evelyn. The name hit him like a physical blow. He dropped the locket and it clattered to the floor, spinning until it stopped, pointing directly at a loose floorboard. His hands trembled as he pried it up. Beneath it, there was a key. Old, iron, and cold as the grave. The key fit the lock in the basement door. A door he had passed 1,000 times without thinking, believing it led to a storage room. But the lock was ancient, ornate, and when he turned the key, the mechanism groaned like something waking from a long sleep. The door swung open on its own, revealing a staircase spiraling down into darkness. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled of earth and roses. Roses. There were no flowers in that house. Elias took a step forward, then another. The stairs were stone, worn smooth by countless feet, though no one had used them in decades. He counted each step as he descended. 23. 24. 25. At the bottom, a single candle flickered to life on a small table. Next to it, a photograph in a silver frame. A girl with silver hair and eyes that seemed to glow. She was smiling, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knows a secret you are not ready to hear. Elias picked up the photograph. The candle went out. When the light returned, it was not from the candle. It came from the walls themselves, from symbols carved into the stone that pulsed with a sickly green glow. And she was standing there. The girl from the photograph. She was taller than he expected, her silver hair falling past her waist, her dress black and old-fashioned, like something from a century ago. Her eyes were black, completely black, and when she looked at him, he felt his thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm. "You came back," she said. Her voice was soft, but it echoed as if coming from everywhere at once. Elias tried to speak, but his throat was dry. "Who are you?" he managed. She tilted her head, her smile widening just a fraction. "You know who I am. You have always known." She stepped closer, and the symbols on the walls flared brighter. "I am Evelyn. And I have been waiting for you, Elias. Waiting for you to remember what you promised me." She reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart. Her fingers were ice cold. "The last time you were here, you were not Elias. You were someone else. Someone who loved me. Someone who killed me." His breath caught in his throat. The girl tilted her head, a gesture that seemed both curious and predatory. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to move. She spoke, her voice like wine through dead leaves. "You opened the door," she said. He shook his head, words failing him. She stepped closer, and the green light flickered across her face, revealing features that were beautiful but wrong, like a painting that had been left too long in the rain. "I have been waiting," she continued. "For a very long time." His fingers tightened around the locket in his pocket. The metal felt warm, almost hot against his palm. The girl noticed. Her eyes, dark and without pupils, fixed on the bulge in his coat. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "You found it," she whispered. "I knew you would." He finally found his voice. "What are you?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I am what your grandmother locked away. I am what she promised to protect. And now you have let me out." He took a step back, then another. The symbols on the walls pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The girl did not move, but her shadow grew, spreading across the stone floor like oil on water. "There is no going back," she said. "The door is open." He turned and ran, his feet pounding on the wooden stairs. Behind him, he heard her voice, soft and amused. "I will find you. I always find those who open the door." The basement door slammed shut behind him, but he knew it would not hold. He burst into the attic, his hands shaking as he threw open boxes and rifled through papers. The locket lay open in his palm, the photograph of the girl staring up at him with those same dark eyes. He found his grandmother's journal, bound in cracked leather, the pages yellowed with age. He opened it to the first entry. Her handwriting was sharp, hurried. "I have made a terrible mistake. She is not a spirit. She is not a ghost. She is something older, something that should never have been found." He read on, his blood turning cold. His grandmother had discovered the girl in the basement of the old house, trapped in a circle of salt and iron. She had been there for centuries, a prisoner of someone who knew what she was. But his grandmother, in her arrogance, had thought she could control her. She was wrong. The journal ended abruptly, the last page smeared with what looked like dried blood. The final words were barely legible. "She feeds on memory. She takes what you love and leaves you hollow. I have forgotten my own name." He read on, his blood turning cold. His grandmother had discovered the girl in the basement of the old house, trapped in a circle of salt and iron. She had been there for centuries, a prisoner of someone who knew what she was. But his grandmother, in her kindness, had broken the circle. She thought she was saving a lost soul. She did not know she was releasing a hunger that had waited for generations. The journal trembled in his hands as he read the final entry. "If you find this, do not go to the basement. Do not open the door. She will tell you she is trapped. She will lie. She is the trap." He slammed the journal shut and looked at the locket. The girl's eyes in the photograph seemed to follow him, dark and patient. His grandmother had written that the girl fed on belief. The more you believed her story, the stronger she became. He remembered how easily he had believed her in the basement. How her voice had felt like a hand on his heart. He wanted to throw the locket across the room, but his fingers would not let go. They were cold. Colder than the air around him. He looked down and saw his grandmother's handwriting on the last page, smudged and urgent. "She is already in you." He heard a soft sound from the basement. Not a voice. A whisper of movement, like silk sliding over stone. He knew he should run. He knew he should leave the house and never look back. But his feet were already moving toward the stairs. The photographs on the wall caught his eye. His grandmother as a young woman. His mother as a child. And in every picture, in the shadows behind them, a faint outline. A girl with dark hair. He had never noticed her before. Now he could not unsee her. She had been there all along, waiting. The whisper grew louder. It sounded like his name. He stopped at the top of the basement stairs. The door was open. He had closed it. He was certain he had closed it. The air that came from below was cold and smelled of earth and old iron. He wanted to call out, to ask if anyone was there, but his throat was dry. The locket in his hand grew warm. He looked down and saw the photograph had changed. The girl was no longer looking at the camera. She was looking at him. Her mouth was open, as if she was speaking. And he could hear her voice, not from the basement, but from inside his own skull. You opened the door. Now you have to finish what she started. He turned to run, but his shadow did not move with him. It stayed on the wall, stretching toward the basement door. He watched in horror as his shadow grew, arms, long and thin, reaching for the darkness below. He tried to scream, but the sound came out as a whisper. The locket fell from his hand and hit the floor. The photograph was empty now. The girl was gone. And in the mirror at the end of the hall, he saw her standing behind him. Her hand rested on his shoulder. Her lips brushed his ear. She whispered, "You are the door now. And I am already home." He felt the pull, a cold hand wrapping around his ankle, not of flesh but of will. His shadow had become a bridge, a rope of darkness that tied him to the basement. He tried to lift his foot, but it was heavy, rooted, as if the floor had grown teeth around his shoe. The air thickened, and the whisper from below became a word, a single syllable spoken in a language older than his bones. It was his name. Not the one his mother gave him, but the one he had forgotten, the true name buried under years of noise and forgetting. The basement exhaled, and the light bulb above him flickered, casting the room into a strobe of terror. In the flashes, he saw the stairs were not stairs anymore, but a throat, lined with ribs. His shadow crawled down the first step, then the second, leaving him standing in the dim light without a dark twin. He felt lighter, emptier, as if a part of his soul had been scooped out with a spoon. The basement door yawned wider, and from the hole came a sound like wet paper tearing. He wanted to scream, but his voice was gone, stolen by the thing that now wore his shadow like a coat. He watched it descend, a flat silhouette folding into the deeper black, and for a moment he saw its face, his own face, but twisted, grinning with teeth that had no light behind them. It waved at him, a mockery of farewell, and then it merged with the darkness, becoming one with the hunger below. The basement door slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot. He stumbled back, his hand hitting the wall, and when he looked down, he saw a black handprint on the wood, perfect and smoking, as if burned into the grain by an invisible fire. The house groaned, and the lights in the hallway flickered in a pattern, a rhythm, a code. He realized it was a countdown. 10 flashes, then 9, then 8. Each blink of light brought the cold closer, the smell of iron stronger. He knew he had to move, to run, to break the door down and escape, but his legs were not his own anymore. They belonged to the shadow that had abandoned him, and they wanted to go back, to join the feast below. His legs walked him forward, step by step, toward the basement door. His hands clawed at the wallpaper, leaving long scratches, but the momentum was unstoppable, a tide pulling him into the dark. He could feel the cold seeping through the wood, and he knew the door was not locked. It was waiting, patient, hungry. He tried to scream, but only a whimper escaped, a tiny sound swallowed by the house. The countdown in the lights reached 3, then 2, then 1. The door swung open on its own, and the darkness inside was not empty. It had a shape, a form, a face made of shadows and old pain. It reached out with a hand of smoke, and he felt it touch his chest, cold and final. The shadow touched his chest, and he felt his heart stop for a single beat, then start again, but different, slower, colder. It pulled him into the embrace, and he felt his body dissolve, not into pain but into memory, into the echo of 1,000 nights spent alone in the dark. He saw the basement not as a room but as a wound, a tear in the world where forgotten things crawled back to life. And in that moment, he understood. The shadow was not stealing him. It was reclaiming him, a piece of himself he had lost years ago, on a night he had chosen to forget. He closed his eyes, and the basement swallowed him whole, the door closing softly behind him, the house falling silent, waiting for the next visitor to hear the whisper from below. He became the night itself, a whisper in the static between worlds. The basement walls flickered with faces he almost recognized, strangers who wore his eyes, his smile, his pain. They spoke in tongues of forgotten promises, and he understood every word. The shadow grew, swallowing the room, the house, the street outside. He was everywhere and nowhere, a wound in the fabric of time, bleeding into every moment he ever lived. A mirror appeared before him, and in it, he saw himself at 7 years old, holding a dead bird in his hands, tears streaming down his face. Another mirror showed him at 16, standing over a grave, his father's name carved in stone. The shadow whispered, "This is the price of seeing." Every loss, every scar, every moment of broken glass in his heart was laid bare, and he realized the shadow was not a monster but a mirror, reflecting the darkness he had carried since birth. He reached for the child, wanting to comfort him, to say the pain would pass, but his fingers touched cold glass. The mirror shattered, and the child's face crumbled into dust, blown away by a wind that came from nowhere. The shadow laughed, a sound like breaking bones, and said, "You cannot save what is already lost." The man understood then that the past is a locked door, and the key is buried with the dead. The void shifted, and he stood in a corridor of doors, each one a year of his life. Some doors were warm, glowing with laughter and love, but others bled darkness, the wood warped and cracked. He walked past 1987, 1993, 2005, and stopped at a door with a red handprint, fresh and wet. The shadow whispered, "Open it," and he knew this was the moment he had been running from his entire life. He pushed the door open, and the smell of antiseptic hit him like a fist. His mother lay in the bed, her hand cold and still, the machines humming a flatline lullaby. The doctor was speaking, but the words were muffled, underwater. He remembered this day, the day he learned that love is a fragile thing, easily broken, never repaired. The shadow wrapped around him, cold and comforting, and said, "Now you understand. Now you are ready." He remembered this day, had lived it once, but now the memory was a wound that would not close. The doctor's mouth moved, forming words he knew by heart. "She's gone, we did everything we could." But the voice came from behind him, not from the doctor. The shadow whispered, "You could have been there sooner. You could have held her hand." The man turned, and the room stretched into a long, white tunnel, the bed receding into a point of light. He ran. Not away, but toward the light, toward the point where the bed had disappeared. His footsteps echoed, but the floor beneath him turned to glass, and below it, he saw other versions of himself. One was laughing at a birthday party, another was screaming in a car crash, a third was kissing a woman whose face he could not recognize. The shadow walked beside him now, a silent companion, and pointed at a door that read 2012. He did not want to open it. His hand trembled on the brass handle, cold as ice. The shadow breathed into his ear, "She is waiting for you." But he knew who was behind that door. Not his mother. Not a lover. A version of himself he had buried so deep that even the memory of that year was a ghost. He turned the handle, and the door swung open into a room filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a face that was his, but twisted, aged, weeping, or laughing without sound. The man stepped inside, and the mirrors began to speak, a chorus of his own voice. "You failed her. You left him. You broke everything you touched." The words layered over each other, a cacophony of self-hatred. He covered his ears, but the sound came from inside his skull. The shadow stood in the center of the room, no longer a silhouette, but a mirror itself, reflecting nothing but a void. "Look," the shadow said, and the man saw his own reflection shatter, piece by piece, falling like rain. He reached out and caught a shard, and in it, he saw a child's birthday cake, candles flickering, a woman with his mother's smile. The shard cut his palm, and the blood dripped onto the floor, where it formed a river that carried him forward. The room dissolved, and he was standing in a kitchen, the smell of pancakes and coffee, a woman humming a song he had forgotten. She turned, and it was her, his mother, young and alive, her eyes full of light. She smiled and said, "You're late, but I saved you a plate." The river of blood carried him through the corridor, and the walls dissolved into memories. He sought his mother's face, not as a ghost, but as she was before the illness, laughing in his sunlit kitchen. He saw the lover he left, dancing in the rain. He saw the child he had been, building a castle of sand. The mirrors were gone now, replaced by a single door at the end of the hall. It was not grand or terrifying. It was plain, wooden, a door he had walked through 1,000 times. The shadow whispered behind him, "You cannot undo what is done." He turned and faced the darkness. "No," he said, "but I can carry it." He pushed the door open, and the light flooded out, warm and golden. It was the room of his childhood home, the one he had forgotten. The walls were covered in drawings he had made as a boy, crayon suns and stick figures, a family holding hands. His mother's voice echoed from somewhere, soft and distant, "You always drew us together." He felt a hand on his shoulder, and he knew it was not the shadow. It was the ghost of his own forgiveness. He looked at the drawings, at the flawed, beautiful lines, and he understood. He had not failed. He had lived. And living meant breaking, and mending, and breaking again. The embrace was not real, but it was true. He felt the weight of years lift from his chest, the guilt, the shame, the endless loop of regret. His mother's voice whispered, "You are not your mistakes. You are the one who keeps walking." The shadow had faded, dissolved into the light. He turned and looked at the door behind him, the one he had entered through. It was gone. There was only the room, the drawings, and the quiet hum of peace. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in decades, he smiled. He was not healed, but he was whole. He picked up a crayon from the floor, a blue one, and added a new figure to the drawing. The figure he drew was small, with a crooked smile, standing beside his mother and the lover in the child. It was himself, the version he had buried, finally welcomed home. The room began to dissolve, not into darkness, but into a gentle fog that smelled of rain and earth. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he was standing on a hill under a pale sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of amber and rose. Below him, a path wound through the grass, leading to a distant city where lights were beginning to flicker on. He knew that path. It was the way home. Not the home he had lost, but the one he had built, step by broken step. He took the first step, and the earth felt solid beneath him. The wind carried the scent of pine and the distant sound of laughter. He did not look back. The shadow, the mirrors, the river of blood, they were all part of him now, memories carried in the marrow of his bones. He was not a hero. He was not a villain. He was a man who had walked through the dark and found the light on the other side. The path stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility. He walked, and the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a single star to guide him. The story did not end. It simply began again, in the quiet, ordinary miracle of a man choosing to live.